dressed, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners caught the charge for all this love like Elder Bars. Fresh dressed, living large, German whips in my garage. Most my partners caught the charge for all this love like Elder Bars. We keep it rockin', these chicks be flocking my coupe. We keep it rockin', fresh eggs outside of my stoop. We keep it rockin', they love to give us.
Hello and welcome to the early morning edition of the CFB Super Show. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. Joined, nope, not today, rolling solo on this one. Bear with me. It is bright and early 7 a.m. on the West Coast. I got very, very little sleep. I do have to go to work today at my day job, so I am going to bust through this for us, get you guys what you need, and move on to make some money. So don't make fun of me too much here as I'm trying to choke down some pretty bad coffee that I had to make myself this morning. But yeah, we got the live show here. I'm going to break down my top plays at quarterback, running back, wide receiver as usual, kind of, show who I'm prioritizing. Any news that's kind of dropped, which very little at this moment in time, any of important relevance, but if anything happens during the show, I'll certainly break that for you. And then recap the prize picks that I'm looking at. A lot of you guys watch this on demand, which we appreciate throughout the day. Extends the show flight for the show as the slate is very long today, especially on DraftKings. The 10-gamer starts at noon Eastern and goes on past 4 o'clock Eastern into the other slate because of the game starting at 3:30. So appreciate all the continued support. If you guys are watching this, please hit that like button below. Helps us within the YouTube algo get our content seen. The more eyes on our content, the more we're able to make for you, the better the content becomes, although we're already pretty damn good. So let's just jump right in. If you guys have questions as well, on the live chat to your right, feel free to post comments, questions, concerns, coffee orders, whatever it might be that you want to do. And then at yourfielderchoice.com, that promotion is still going on, so you definitely want to take advantage of that. Won't be lasting too much longer, I don't think. 50% off your first 2 months, $25 a month for those first 2 months, which is a steal. We're pretty unique in that we offer you one price for all sports. So not only would you get the content on my college stuff, WNBA, MLB, NFL, which is back, esports, pretty much everything that we offer. So we also have cheat sheets, top plays, Discord, members only Discord live shows, all of that good stuff. So, all right, let's jump into quarterbacks, talk about the top 4 quarterbacks that I like. I've also kind of had time to think about the slate, which happens a lot, right? Especially when I'm up all night. So there's a few plays that I'm going to add in that I'm a little higher on now. And I've also had a chance to really analyze the ownership and see where, the industry is going, where we might want to follow or where we want to, separate ourselves. So that quarterback, the first one that I really like, and he's projecting very low owned, and I thought this would happen, is Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez is a dual threat. And I know that this is going to scare people because when they played Illinois, he didn't look so good, I guess. And the 2 games he has looked good, he beat up on patsies, right? So people are going to be a little bit worried, but he still has put up, pretty big numbers for the most part. And it wasn't that bad against Illinois. So I think he has a chance to do some damage. The 3 games so far, he's thrown for 728 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And he's rushed for 256 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So 7-3. I know the industry is on Keaton Slovis right now because he throws the ball a lot. And he's low priced, and I get it. And it's Washington State's defense, but USC is in real turmoil right now. They just got rid of their coach. There's, Drake London's banged up. I just don't see that play being the slam dunk that it's being presented as. And he very well could still pay off because he is so cheap. But to me, I would rather take Amart. And I know he's on the road, and I know he's facing Oklahoma, who's a good team, but he's a dual threat. He's going to get his on the ground. We've seen, Malik Cunningham, who's a big time dual threat on the road, not throwing so well, get there with his rushing. So not that I'm suggesting Amart's as good as Malik Cunningham or anything, but he certainly has the opportunity. That Oklahoma Sooners defense isn't an elite unit. On the same token, Nebraska's played some patsies and won. Well, Oklahoma played Western Carolina and smashed them. But when they played Tulane in week 1, what happened with Michael Pratt? He nearly led them to a victory. He scored 4 total touchdowns, 3 passing, 1 rushing. He's a bit of a dual threat himself. He profiles a lot and play style a lot like Amart. So there's no reason to think that he can't duplicate those numbers. The issue with Nebraska is, of course, their offensive line doesn't necessarily protect a lot for Amart. So he may not have time to go through all his reads. He may have to take off. That would be the one main concern for me. But this Oklahoma defense for 2 years now has been very fantasy friendly. So people sleeping on Amart, he comes in at like 9% owned. I'm going to have a hard time fading him. And if he busts, I think we'll still be okay because of the guys that will be able to pay up for using him. And Slovis is going to have to throw at least 3 touchdowns, definitely possible, 300 plus yards, because he's not going to add anything on the ground. And he's certainly going to throw an interception, maybe 2. All right. So next QB I want to talk about is my guy, Desmond Ridder. This should be no surprise. Ritter's projecting kind of mid-range in terms of ownership. Whenever he's on the slate, you guys know I'm going to be talking him up. And I thought about this a lot. I thought, I'm going to go Amart. I'm definitely locking him in. And then maybe I need to follow the industry, go with a guy like Bryce Young, who I'll talk about in a second, or maybe Keaton Slovis. And I just can't bring myself to play Slovis. And it may be the wrong move, but Ridder is just, he's going to be a top play today. He's going to be a top 3 scorer at the position, if not the top. I was very confident week 1 with his numbers versus Rattler. He ended up coming through for us. Facing, a very beatable Indiana Hoosiers team, that is missing talent. They're rusty. Their quarterback is very, he's favoring himself a lot. Like he's not throwing with purpose, coming off that injury. I'm obviously a Michael Penix fan, but I'm going to go Ridder here. His passing has been very strong so far this year. It looks improved from last year. He's completed almost 73% of his 47 attempts for 538 yards. He's thrown 6 touchdowns. He's only 1 interception. Where that shine's really come off of him is the fact that he only has 27 rushing yards on the ground so far. Hasn't had to play anyone really where he needed to use his legs. That Miami of Ohio game, he did score a rushing touchdown for us, but against Murray State, why bother? And I had time to think about it and read boards and stuff. Why bother having him run against, Murray State, where you're going to win handily and take a chance of him getting hurt? So I'm not as worried as some people are about his lack of carries in that game, because he wasn't needed. Against, Indiana's defense should be good enough at home to, I guess, make it so Ridder has to do a lot more. When we talked about Jerome Ford on the show on Thursday about him stealing carries from Ridder, I'm less worried about it. And now that it's actually, 90 minutes to lock, for me, that's Desmond Ridder time. So I'm going to roll 2 dual threats in my lineup, I think. And Ridder's, he's skating dangerously close to being my QB2 now, or super flex guy. All right, next QB, Jaden Delora, kind of going off the board here. Another pivot off of that Keaton Slovis chalk. And I know that the talk would be, well, Delora's 7.4, Slovis is 7.2. Why wouldn't you just pay down $200 and get Slovis when he's going to throw so much volume? Well, USC's defense has not looked that good. Delora has kind of separated himself in this QB field now. Tennessee transfer Jared Quintano. They've been battling all the way through training camp. He got some carries in week 1, or some snaps, I should say. Jared's not a very good QB. We knew that, and Delora really stepped out and started to separate himself. Now, I know last week he played Portland State. Portland State is not USC, so I'm not going to pretend they are. But it was good to see how sharp he looked. Completed 21 of his 29 passes, 3 touchdowns. He also has shown rushing upside this year. He has almost 70 rushing yards as a score, so he does have that ability to run when all things are clicking. Like I said, that USC secondary hasn't really been that impressive. When they whooped on San Jose State, Starkle still threw for over 300 yards. Tanner McKee, who for Stanford nobody expects to be a Heisman winner or anything, or a DFS play at that, but he threw for over 230 yards, scored 2 touchdowns on the air, 1 on the ground. He made USC look kind of silly, right? And they struggled against the run as well. So I just feel like all this turmoil with USC, this talk about who's going to be their coach, there's really 2 ways it's going to go, right? No in the middle. USC is going to rally around, their interim coach, or hey, we need to go out and win this game, or everybody's going to just be totally lost, flat, and WSU is going to get it done. So I tend to lean towards that. We'll see how it happens. So Laura, I really felt like he might end up being in my main lineup next to Amar and be really, two cheap guys, and that would give me leverage off of Slovis. But Delora also has an interception problem from last year, so he's kind of more of a GPP play, I think. Although I do think he puts up 25 plus fantasy points, I would just rather go up to Ritter and feel a little bit more safer. And we do have the value available to us with this build and running back, because I'm on a running back and no one else is. Surprise, surprise. Now we can easily fit a pay up quarterback. So, but Delora is definitely a guy in play. All right, what do we got? 1 second here. Okay, cheat sheet. Cheat sheet will be out in a little bit too, guys. I haven't had a chance to get that out, but that will be out this morning after the show. Bryce Young. Now that is the industry chalk, Bryce Young. Everybody loves them some Bryce Young. He's done very well for Alabama thus far. He is projecting as the second highest owned quarterback, real close to Rattler though, Slovis by a lot. Young is a good pay up. He's going to be in a game where Florida should at least be adequately keeping it close. I don't think it'll end up being too close to the final score, but I think for that first 3 quarters, it should be. He doesn't have the rushing upside you'd like to see when you're considering paying over $9K for a guy. It's really, dual threats are the name of the game here, but his passing volume is typically going to get him there. And I would be more comfortable with him over a guy like Slovis personally. And I guess that's what we'd be paying for, right? So 30-ish fantasy points, I think we'd see. He's thrown 7 touchdowns in his first 2 games. So that's pretty big. Completion rate well over 70%, almost 600 passing yards. So amazing weapons around him. We know he's got Mechie, Jameson Williams, our guy JoJo Earl, who looked pretty good last game. So I put in the article that I was 50-50 at the moment about using him with my QB lock A-Mart. And I think it's definitely viable. It may even be wiser in your cash games to run Bryce Young, because if he fade and he doesn't and Ritter doesn't match or beat, then we might be in a little bit of trouble. But me as Mr. Leverage, and I wouldn't say I'm reckless, but in football I really do believe in leverage. So I'm still prioritizing Ritter over Young. I know I'm the only one in the industry who's going to be doing that, but I'm okay with it. And then as far as other QBs, just kind of before we move on to running back, Rattler, of course, is going to be probably pretty chalky in cash games. He got there last week in a blowout, 30 plus fantasy points. Against Nebraska, he should certainly do well. De'Aaron King at 7.6 is pretty interesting to me for GPPs. And then Mackenzie Milton at 6.1. I wouldn't roll him in anything besides like an alt, of course, an alt lineup. But, if he can get back to his old form at all at 6.1, he could really do some damage there. So, all right, let's move to running back. So I have four that we're going to highlight here. First up is King Duru. He is the cover boy. I'm sticking with the play against Notre Dame running backs. Rush defense. He's only 4.6. I know that Dylan Downing is going to get work. Most people now seem to think it's going to be a true 50-50 split. And I don't know that I believe that based on what I've personally read and just looking at the game, how it played out. I still think, Downing out-touched him because the game was not close. It was in hand. And they could afford to give the younger Downing some more work. So I still believe Dury's going to get the first series. He's going to get majority of the work, even if that ends up being like 17 to 12 or something like that. Anything over 10 carries for King at this price against this rush defense is going to pay off. So when I see him projecting at like 4% owned, I gotta switch my pants, because that's just too exciting for me. Especially when callback was 0.7% last week. I know it's only been 2 games. Technically, the numbers guys will tell you that's not a large enough sample. Okay, that's fine. I get it. But this is football, and we don't have the opportunity like we do in MLB to wait 90 games before we can say, okay, that's a big enough sample. We just don't get that in football. So until ND, proves to me that they're going to stop the run, I'm going to keep plugging in running backs against them. Now, with that being said, I am going to go ahead and play the showdown between Purdue and Notre Dame. I am going to get exposure and put Dylan Downing in my lineup so that if I get screwed somehow or he gets the touchdowns, a la Reese White versus Shamari Jones, at least I'll be happy that I got him in showdown and can make some money back. So I am protecting myself that way, but I will say I'm very confident in the King Duru play. Notre Dame's given up almost 200 yards per game on the ground. So, and that's against some good running backs, Brian Koback, Sean Corbin, Sean Ward, I mean, these are good running backs, but they're not super elite backs. It's not as if Brees Hall is coming into town, or by John Robinson or something, where you say, well, King Drew's none of those guys. I know Drew is at least as good as Treshaun, Ward, easily. So yeah, I'm on the King Drew train. He's rushed for 451 yards, 6 touchdowns as a freshman in 2019. So, I mean, I put in my article, and it stands true. If the industry's going to hand us a value running back at a sub 5K price that's going to get 10 plus carries against that rushing defense, who am I to fade? So I'm on him. Secondly here, and industry chalk, and Pete really, I'll give him credit because I wasn't looking at Miami that much heading into Thursday. Keep in mind, though, I'm writing multiple sports, so I don't really start diving into the slate and how I want to build it until like early Friday morning. I mean, I get the plays I like, and then I start putting it all together Friday morning. So I hadn't thought I was going to play Cameron Harris just yet. Once I read all the reports about Don Chaney being out, his price, his matchup, yes, Cameron Harris at 5'4" is an absolute lock. He is projected to be the highest owned running back of the TK slate. And I'm okay. And as I always say this, I'm okay eating chalk as long as it's good chalk and the price is right and it is on him. He's going to be, an RB1 probably for the rest of the season with Chaney out until somebody else kind of emerges there. But Harris is definitely going to be the bell cow. The industry was enamored with him 2 seasons ago. Last year, he kind of soured everybody because he didn't get the bell cow carries. And now he's back in the limelight. He needs to do us right. 128 yards and a touchdown so far this season. He's caught 3 passes. So, you can really run just all mid-range or my guy King at running back today and have enough money to go out and get yourself some premium wide receivers or a premium quarterback. I know typically I usually preach going cheap at wide receiver, especially early on, but this is a weekend that I could see paying up at wide receiver. Kevin Marks, the Buffalo RB1. He has got the RB spot all to himself. He was the 1B to Jarrett Patterson's 1A. Patterson's off to the pros. Marks is a strong player, man. He rushed for over 1,000 yards in 2019. He has over 2,500 yards in his 3-year career as mainly a backup. But as I said, Buffalo runs the ball so much when they had those two. He wasn't really a backup. He was more like a 1B. He's got 30 rushing touchdowns in his career. The Buffalo passing game is pretty bad. Their QB play is bad, so they're going to run. The nice thing is that Coastal Carolina, and I've highlighted this at length, but I'm going to continue to say it here in case you guys are watching me for the first time this week. Coastal Carolina has been giving up 223 rushing yards in their first 2 games, and they've won both games handily. So even though they're stomping on teams offensively, they're still not stopping the run game, and the other teams are able to take advantage of that. Jason Bean for Kansas, their quarterback, he rushed for over 100 yards, a couple of scores. Devin Neal, kind of their own RB1 to RB2, he rushed for 40 yards in a score. There was a guy, 100-yard rusher in their first game. So Coastal Carolina is definitely not a team that is going to stop. Citadel. Sorry, I had to wake up for a second. Jalen Adams of Citadel, 16 rushes, 100 yards. Nathan Storch, 23 carries, 65 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So, and these are teams that got blown out, 40-14 type of scores. So Marks is definitely in play. Marks is actually projecting pretty well. It looks like his ownership's actually gone down since even a few hours ago. But he's still projecting like a top 5 owned quarterback or running back. So he's definitely in play. He was a guy that I was looking at playing in my main. I've kind of softened on that a little bit just because of how my build's taking me, but he's certainly in play. And by the time Locke heads our way, I may end up with Kevin Marks in my main. And then I have my 4th one as Jerome Ford, although I have softened on Jerome Ford. So I still want to talk about him. We have a graphic for him. Ritter's rushing numbers are down because of Ford's dominance. In 2 games so far, his YPC is 7.8. You guys know I'm a big YPC fan. 230 yards, 30 carries, punched it in 4 times, 2 receptions. Even as the primary backup to Jared Dokes last year, he rushed for almost 500 yards and just under 10 touchdowns. So there should be no doubt about him being over 1,000-yard rusher this year with 10 plus touchdowns as the primary runner. If you're going to fade Ritter, I do think it makes a lot of sense to play Ford because there's going to be I think this is going to be more points scored on the Cincy side than that total, projects. I know it's a lower total game. I just don't think that's Indiana's going to score that much, even at home. I think Indiana, if anything, is going to get like 7 to 10 points with Cincy getting the rest. So it may still hit the under on that total, but I don't see Cincy not scoring at least, 28 points. Honestly, I think they're just too explosive on offense. They have a point to prove. They want to be in the college football playoff. It's going to take a miracle. I realize this. They're going to have to run the table, and something that will get the talking heads going, on Monday morning will be a nice little 35-7 victory over Indiana on their field. Are they going to do it? Maybe not by that much. Are they going to win? I'm fairly confident about that. So that means a lot of running game. Their strength. Jerome Ford, who I think is a better play than people are realizing because of his volume, and then Desmond Ritter. I would not play them both together. I did tinker and toy with that idea, but I am not going to do that. I think that will actually ultimately be a losing play. As far as ownership goes, projection-wise, our cheat sheet will be up, as I said, shortly. I am seeing Cameron Harris as the industry chalk at running back. Kieran Williams, not a close second, but the next closest. Trey Potts at third, meh. Letty Brown, okay, and Kevin Marks. I say that about Trey Potts because he's facing Colorado team that just curbed the hell out of Texas A&M. They lost, yes, but statistically, Isaiah Spiller had a hell of a time trying to find yardage on the ground. Devin Kane had a hell of a time trying to find yardage on the ground. Spiller caught a touchdown at the end, which saved his fantasy owners, all of us, a day, and his stat line looks better than it probably should have. Potts is not Mo Ibrahim. I think it's important people realize that. And I know this Minnesota offense likes to run, and they run, and they run, and they run. But Mo Ibrahim is a special being, and he deserves and needs 35 plus carries because he's so good. I know Potts had 30 plus carries last game. I'm very hesitant to sign off on him and give my stamp of approval like the rest of the industry is. His projection is nice and solid, but Colorado's rush defense and their defensive front is better than people realize. And it was cliche to say last week, but it was a warning. People that come and play in Colorado and aren't used to that higher elevation air sometimes struggle. What happened in Texas A&M? They struggled. So I don't know. Potts at 30% seems mighty freaking high to me. I guess just take, trust yourself at the end of the day. That's the other thing I like to say. Yeah, I got leverage plays. Yeah, I'm confident. Yeah, tell me if you, I've won you guys money before in the past. I appreciate the continued support. But at the end of the day, I will always tell you to trust your gut. So if you've done research and you see something with Potts and you are a believer in that play, then by all means do play him. I mean, it's not as if he's going to put up a bagel, right? He'll probably will get 20 plus carries. I mean, that's for sure. It's just a question of, is he going to have an YPC more than 2.2 on those carries? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's going to happen. They don't have a lot in the receiving game, though, so they're certainly going to have to feed him. I don't think anyone is denying that. And then Letty Brown, 6'9". It's a nice price on Letty. His YPC is trash this year, but it's Letty Brown. He'll probably still score 3 touchdowns. I don't have him in my player pool, but I certainly don't hate him. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell anyone to not play Letty Brown. I think there's other running backs around his price that are a little more advantageous, but he's got a high floor. Let's go to wide receiver. Give you guys my top wide receivers. Industry chalk once more. It's basically just a rerun on the WR1. Garrett Wilson, his price has gone up a little bit, but not enough on DK, only 6'4". I don't know what the deal is. If next time Ohio State's not on the slate, if he's not well over 7K, then they're just giving us they're making us play 2v2 on this. Chris Olave is an excellent option as well. They should be priced probably the same. They should probably both be 8K actually, and just make people decide. If you're going to price Stroud at 10K, just make his 2 main weapons 8K and just make people decide. Because right now it's not a decision on Garrett Wilson. You just play him. Olave's a good player, an excellent player, but is he 2K better than Wilson? Probably not. Wilson's been targeted 25 times. Olave's been targeted 23 times. The only thing Olave hasn't beaten in is yardage, 243 to 197. That's not enough for me to pay 2K more. If you want to leverage your way a little bit off those chalkier pass catchers, Jackson Smith-Njigba had been targeted 13 times. He's caught 9 for 157 and 2. He had a monster game last week. If you're mainly just a GPT player, I do think you could probably get away with fading Garrett Wilson simply because of this. They're putting a lot on Stroud's shoulders. We talked about that on the show, Pete specifically. And they want to run the ball a little more because they don't want to wear Stroud out, in these games before they get into the heart of conference play and start heading their way towards the college football playoff. They don't want him to break down. So they're going to run more. And that would be a main reason for me to maybe consider fading, a guy like Garrett Wilson in some of my GP builds. Certainly wouldn't do it in my main. Even I wouldn't do that. But there is a chance, maybe he gets 4 for 40 and a touchdown. Still would be a decent score for 6'4", not the slate breaker that I think everybody is expecting from him as major chalk. And then if you get, you leverage off to someone else, maybe you go up and you pay David Bell or something like that, then you're going to be in the driver's seat. So this is a different way to think about your build. Jalen Naylor at 4K is also somebody that is looking pretty good. I mean, he's going to be fairly high owned. He's not the highest owned by any means, Wilson is. And then I show it as Jacory Roberson, Taj Washington, then Naylor, and Bryant right after. Naylor's okay. I was a little more excited about him during the show than I am now. I think I don't know, 4K. He's probably gonna make value actually, but I just don't think he's gonna put up like some 20 plus score. And people really get excited about these plays, and that's what they're expecting. And even if he goes 3x, 4x, they're gonna be disappointed, right? It is a puzzling price for him at 4K. He's definitely been targeted a lot. Team high 14. Jaden Reed's right behind him with 12. Reed's probably the GPP guy at 6'9", of course, but Michigan, I need to get it out of my head that Michigan State is not last. They're not Michigan State of last year. They're a better offense, and it is okay to play them in cash, I think now. Naylor is better play than Mario Williams, who we've been using a lot the last 2 weeks, who's only like 100 or 200 more than Naylor. But I don't know that we'll need him necessarily in our main build unless you're going super high price running backs. All right, Taj Washington. It sounds like Drake London's going to go. That was kind of a contingent play for me. Not that Taj was not in play if Drake played. Drake's banged up. He tweaks his back. I wrote about it. It's a type of injury that he could very easily tweak it if he gets hit wrong, extends out the wrong way, because London makes some amazing catches. We know that he could very easily miss part of the game with re-aggravation of that back injury. So Taj is a good play. He should be able to do some damage against his WSU secondary either way. He's only 5K. When he was at Memphis, he was an absolute stud. It seems that people maybe don't remember when he was at Memphis. It was only a year or two ago, but people don't seem to remember, short memories. He's targeted 75 times, caught 43 of those, 734 yards, 6 touchdowns. Right now, the targets for USC are very concentrated, and Slovis hasn't done a good job of really spreading out or even running the passing game. All he has to do is really throw it towards Drake London. He has 24 times, or Taj Washington. He has 14 times, and hope they make a play on it. And that's really been their offense. Nobody else is close with targets. The next closest would be 6. So like I said, if London would have been out, Taj would have been elevated to a WR1 for me. He is still very much in play, and he is in top 5 in ownership. Gary Bryant's also in the player pool because he's so cheap, but with London playing, Bryant's just an okay play for me. Again, it's kind of that thing that happened last week. There was a value on the slate, and we didn't end up really needing it, and it feels like there's some value emerging here with Mario Williams, Gary Bryant. And we just don't really need them. Unless you're not on the King Guru train with me, then you might need those guys. But if you're riding with the King and you're trying to crown the King, then you won't need them. I was trying to think of that. There was a movie back in the 90s about with Diamond Dallas Page and WCW, and they used to say crown the King, but it's too early for me to remember what that's called. All right, last receiver, Jacory Roberson, 6'8". Yes, and yes. We didn't really hype him that much on Thursday. We did say that it was cheap for him. Wake Forest has been playing patsies, so they haven't had to really target Roberson. But in 2 games, he has been targeted 15 times against patsies. 10 catches, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. Blowout games didn't even play the full amount. FSU will surely keep this close. I know a lot of people are picking FSU to cover/win, and they're going to have to throw the ball. So Roberson will likely maybe even double his targets in one game alone today. We know with Donovan Green out, Roberson was everybody's favorite to be the #1 most targeted receiver in all of college football. That hasn't quite worked out just yet, but as they get into competitive games starting today, I think those targets will go up. So I have reworked my lineup a little bit to find the salary to get Jacory Roberson. So my build's looking a little different than you may have guessed on Thursday, but I am in on him now. And he is projected to be, as I mentioned, the second highest owned wide receiver on the slate. So take that for what it is worth. Before we move on, well, actually, we can pop up that screen with the top plays there. Just so people can look at it. I do want to kind of chat about some other positional plays that I like. I do have a question. Dave Jones, hello, good morning. And then David, do you stack your lineups like you do NFL? I'm trying to start playing CFB, DFS, QB plus WR plus opposing WR. Yeah, I guess you could do that. It depends on, you want to really, Vegas totals matter a little more in college football, as much as I hate to admit. So if you're going to do something like that, you damn sure want to make it a shootout like Notre Dame, Purdue, perhaps. Prices on them are pretty high, but yeah, something like a Plummer, David Bell makes sense as a GPP build. You can also do things like, take Ohio State running back and then pass catchers on the other side. Tulsa, I wouldn't recommend that today, but something like that. You can definitely do stacks in that manner. Correlation matters a whole hell of a lot more in the professional sports. I think that is why I like niche sports. I like niche sports anyways, just because it's better in my opinion. But I have more success just kind of playing who I want without having to worry so much about, oh, this guy's throwing to him. I got to make sure I roster them together. So I don't worry about that stuff quite as much in college football, just so you know. All right. Let me pull. Okay, so I want to talk about Samori Toure. Sounds like Oliver Martin is going to play as of right now. So Toure, I've kind of I've fallen off of a little bit. He was the guy that I was ready to core all in on, pairing with Amart. Let's go. He's 5'6", though. Little higher. If he was in the 4K range, I think I'd still play him. But with Martin playing, and Martin was the one that led the team in targets in week 1, he had 10. I would just be a little scared paying him what is effectively a premium price on Toure. I'm a big fan of him, with Manning limited / out still, but he's more of a GPP play at this point. He's big time. He's a big time threat. He does lead the team with 20 targets. Keep in mind, Martin's been out for 2 games, 13 passes caught, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's had back-to-back games over 110 yards too. So he's a big-time player. Last game, he had 2 catches for over 100 yards. So he's a burner and a threat to score every time. Isaiah Likely at 4.4, the tight end for Coastal. The Coastal, they're going to run a lot. That's really their game. Likely does have 12 targets on the season. He's going to get targeted a lot, especially in the red zone. So he makes sense as kind of like a GPP alt value that no one's going to play with touchdown equity, because we know Coastal is going to live in the red zone in this game by far. And then I'd also like Eastern Michigan transfer Kyan Williams from Buffalo at 5.1. He makes sense as a GPP type of play. Giovanni Ruiz is doubtful. He's not even on the depth chart. So Buffalo will at some point have to throw the ball. They're going to be forced to, and they're going to be looking at Kyan. So he's the guy I could see at 8+ targets today at a really cheap price. He could only end up catching 2 of those, though. Targets don't always end up being catches. There's my man Markeith Ambles in CFL last week. He was targeted 15 times, caught 3 of them. Yes, I had him. I still cashed, thankfully. But just to give you an example, targets don't always equal catches if the quarterback is trash. All right. David Bell, I want to call him a no-brainer, but the problem is none of us are playing him. But he is going to be looking like a no-brainer by the end of the slate. I know he's 7.7, which is tough. The Purdue offense hasn't really suffered much, losing Rondell Moore to the pros. Normally, a team losing a weapon like that would be set back for years. David Bell's a monster. And he was last year, too, next to Moore. His stat line so far, 13 catches, 247, 3 touchdowns. He's been targeted 8 times. Payne Durham, their tight end, has been targeted 12 times. He's caught 11 passes for 174 and 3. Both of those guys make sense to me in a game stack. The problem with the Purdue Notre Dame game stack is that everybody's so expensive, except King Guru, that you're not going to be able to just straight up put 5 or 6 of them in your lineup. Although you probably could try and just not play their quarterbacks, because no one's going to pay 8K plus for Cone. He's kind of, that first game was an outlier. They're also playing their backup a little bit, maybe Plummer, and then running it back with one of those cheapies. So I suppose it's doable. Baby Gronk, like I mentioned, Michael Mayer, he's a big time, catcher. He's 7'3". I wish he'd be a little cheaper, but he is going to be putting up some big time stats. And then circling back around, two running back kind of GPP plays that are somewhat cheap. Excuse me. Shamari Jones for Coastal Carolina. Everybody was on him, the smaller slate last week. Reese White ended up being the one to score 3 touchdowns. I had mentioned that pendulum could easily switch back the other way. Shamari Jones was only out carried by 2 or 3 carries. He has a YPC over 7, so he's a strong play. And with everybody jumping off, I don't think anyone's paying that price for White. I mean, that's kind of ludicrous, but nobody's playing Shamari Jones either. And it's not as if Coastal Carolina is not going to run the ball. That's kind of what they do. They're protecting Grayson McCall. They're doing what Ohio State should do with Stroud, right? They're protecting McCall for the entire season. They're making sure he doesn't take a bunch of unnecessary hits. He'll throw the ball to his 2 guys likely and highly, but really they're running the ball at times. So I wouldn't be surprised if Shamari Jones, rush maybe the yardage will be like 50 to 60, but 2 scores. I'm predicting 2 scores for him. So get him in your GPP lineups. And then Deneric Prince for Tulsa at 5.5. The Buckeyes rush defense is been equally as bad as Notre Dame's. However, they faced much higher level running backs than Notre Dame. So I want to let that sink in for a minute. Mo Ibrahim, I know, amazing player. He's hurt the rest of the year. It's very sad. 40 out for Mo Ibrahim, but he rushed for 163 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 30 carries. Easily would have crossed 200 yards if he didn't get hurt. And then last week, of course, when Oregon pulled the upset, I guess, CJ Verdell, 161 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 20 carries. YPC of 8.1. Oh, sorry. So that's really good. Deneric Prince is certainly no Mo Ibrahim, and he's probably not even CJ Verdell. But the fact of the matter is that rushing defense of Ohio State is very fantasy friendly. So Prince probably sub 10%. The carries might not even be there, but I think he'll be very productive with those carries, and he gets catches too. He does pass out of the backfield, so he's a pretty high level tournament play. If I was not afforded the blessings of having a running back against Notre Dame today, I would probably be looking at Deneric Prince and having a very hard time. I'm not even gonna use that analogy. It's probably not smart. I would be on Deneric Prince if I didn't have another value. And then Kieran Williams, Notre Dame, 7.2. He's expected to be highly owned. Deion Kieran. His YPC is under 4 this year. Pretty not good, but he's going to do some damage today, so I don't mind him as chalk. That's fine. Core has changed a little bit since the other night. Core play number 1, bet you could guess, King Duru. Core number 2, Cameron Harris. Core number 3, hopping out a little bit here, Garrett Wilson. All right, let's talk some prize picks plays here, because my producer Mickey's got to eat some breakfast. I've got to go to work. I definitely need a better coffee than I made. I can't make coffee very well, even though I drink it. Adrian Martinez, over 54.5 rushing yards. Give me all of that. All of it. I want it all. He's going to get over 60 rushing yards today. That number may have moved overnight. If it did, I am comfortable going over 60. If it goes to 61, just ask me. King Duru, over 52.5 rushing yards. Yes, please. And then Tyler Batty, over 42.5 receiving yards. Tyler Batty is a badass. That game's not on the slate. That's a Missouri game. They're playing a pretty soft cupcake. But man, he has been just crushing it. He's off to he's going to set records for Missouri this year if he continues at this pace. So he looks really, really good. He's already got 264 rushing yards, already 128 receiving yards, 9.8 yards per catch, 2 receiving touchdowns, 13 receptions. So I would expect him to cruise over 42.5 receiving yards because they're really running a lot of plays around for him. Desmond Ridder, over 0.5 rushing touchdowns. Yes, I expect Ridder to get back into his rushing mojo today and score us a rushing touchdown if you decide to go with him. If you don't play him, maybe play the prize picks so that you can celebrate with me in the Discord. And then Jacory Robertson, over 89.5 receiving yards. He hasn't really done the major damage just yet because of the blowout games. but I would be very surprised if he doesn't get 100+ yards against this FSU team here and get peppered with targets. Like with his 15 targets in 2 games, I really feel like he may get targeted 15 times today alone. And start making claim to that target lead in CFP that we all expect. So that's pretty much it. I do have a couple bets. Let me move over to the Discord because I posted them there. Nevada -2. I definitely like that. I do like Toledo, Colorado State over 58.5. Those two played each other in 2019, and Kovac was still on the team then, and he went nuts. I think it ended up being 41-35 was the final score. Kovac rushed for 228 yards, 3 touchdowns. They had Patrick O'Brien then, who threw for 400 touchdowns. Marvin Kinsey, those of you may remember him for Colorado State side, he rushed for 246 yards and 2 touchdowns. Warren Jackson, stud from back then, 12 catches, 132, and a touchdown. Those teams have a lot of the same personnel and same philosophy, same style. I mean, it would be very surprised if that total doesn't even hit 70 in that game. So I don't typically like to take totals because it's a little bit of high variance, but I do feel comfortable with that one. Memphis +3.5 at home versus Mississippi State. Mississippi State's defense isn't very good. Memphis's offense has a chance to be amazingly good, high level, top 3 in DFS. We haven't got them on a slate just yet, but they have some amazing production on their team, and they've got some real strong players. And I know that they played Nicholls State and Arkansas State so far. Arkansas State pretty good, but they beat them 55-50. But they're very solid. Hennigan is who they're going to at quarterback now. A lot of hype around him. Brandon Thomas has back-to-back 100-yard rushing games. He's going to be a monster when we finally get him on a slate. Calvin Austin is still there, my dude Calvin Austin, and Javon Ivory, who's been a stud. And obviously tight end du jour, Sean Dykes. So they have a lot of weapons there at Memphis. ASU money line, I am taking them against BYU. I'm not quite a believer in BYU yet. I am a bit of an ASU fan because Jaden Daniels is my boy. And then Hawaii +7. That one could get me in trouble because Hawaii is really not going to play defense, but they're going to score a lot. So it's basically just going to come down to can they run and gun enough to keep it within 7 points? I say yes. So that is what I have there. Let's see. Any questions to wrap it up? If you were to play a DK GPP tournament, do you stack a lower owned wide receiver with a higher owned QB? There's not really a one size fits all for that. Lower owned skill position players definitely obviously going to come in handy. It's easier to get lower owned wide receivers that end up on the optimal because of the nature of touchdown variance. So yeah, I would be fine with that. I mean, you can still cash highly in GPPs and solo bank with a high owned QB. It seems much higher or much harder with the high owned running back or wide receiver for what it's worth. All right, so I'm Walter Waddell, aka Deuce85. You can find me on Twitter. Get over to yourfielderschoice.com. If you're not in the Discord yet, DM me on Twitter. I'll gladly send you the Discord invite link to get you there. You still have just over an hour until lock. We were able to bust this out in 45 minutes, even with a slightly late start. Mickey, my producer, is the man. Appreciate all the continued support of you live watchers and those on demand. Again, if you could do me a solid and hit that like button there, it really helps us get some lunch money. So appreciate everybody. Good luck today, and I will have an article out for the afternoon/late slate, whatever you want to call it there, the 8-game run DK later. And I am going to do a show. I know I say this every week, but I am going to do a show for the late night slate. The late night slate has been mega edge. I play my highest volume on the late night slate. It's typically West Coast teams, although Ohio State is on it this time. People are burned out. They make bad choices. They ignore good plays. They follow the optos too much, and we end up getting low-owned plays on that for years. Not even just the last 2 games. For years, this slate has been the most profitable for me because of the big edge. So if you want to mess around with that and stay up late with me, you East Coasters, I will definitely give you the sauce for that. All right, appreciate everybody. Good luck today. See you.